I'm Patty Scott, and I'm here with Lindsey Cornett, and we're here for our real conversations with real moms. And I just want to remind everybody what this series is about. We're here because we believe that every mom has a superpower, and we want to celebrate and learn from one another instead of competing and comparing. So Lindsey and I met when we were doing Kindred Mom. That's one of her ministries that she's involved in. And I got included in interviewing to be a writer in residence last fall. And it was a precious season of collaboration to bless moms with essays and podcasts. And so Lindsey's mission, and one of the things I adore about her, is to help herself and others overcome perfectionism. And she's a part of a partnership called the Drafting Desk, which encourages women in just releasing perfectionism. So I love Lindsey's heart for moms and her heart for living a real life. And actually, right before we started recording, we started talking about the real life that is in the image behind us and how it can be so intimidating for us with one another as women to just see everything perfect and think that's what we have to live up to. So I think it's awesome that real life is all around us and we get to just live in the middle of it and share with one another right from where we are. So Lindsey, welcome. Thank you for joining in the conversations.
Thanks for having me, Patty.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I wanted you to tell us a little bit about your motherhood and just like your family and how motherhood is for you.
Yeah. Well, we live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I have 3 kids, Ian, Leo, and Ruthie. They are 5, 3, and 2. So I am right in the middle of little people land. My oldest is in kindergarten. And so we are just kind of right in the thick of it. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm sort of learning to embrace the idea that I'm a work from home mom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a writer. Like you said, I write and edit for Kindred Mom and for the Drafting Desk. And so my days, I'm usually trying to cram that kind of stuff into nap times and into the evenings, because I've got Leo and Ruthie home with me during the day, and we just kind of, living life. My kids are not, they're challenging. They're not the most easygoing children in the world. So this is a tiring season, I think, and sometimes a hard season, but there's also so much good, as you know. I often say that like there's not good days and bad days so much in motherhood as there are just good moments and bad moments all kind of smushed together, making up our days. That's definitely true of our season right now. So
I love that. One of the things I do at night is to sit quietly and think about what went well, some sweet moments, and then some challenging moments, and sort of embrace both of them and look at where I was empowered to do well in the challenging ones, or where I fell down on my face and and then need more grace and lessons to go forward in a different way. But just embracing both of those things, I think, gives us such a more balanced perspective, because we can't get kind of like, like, oh, this day was awful and I was awful, instead of, there were good things and there were also challenging things. So I love that perspective that you share. That was awesome.
Thanks.
So I was going to ask you what you think your mothering strengths were.
Yeah, it's a good question. One thing that came to mind, it's just something that I work really hard at, is trying to develop some emotional intelligence in my kids. I kind of, for most of my life, I think I thought that it's bad to be angry, it's bad to be sad, that we kind of want to push those emotions away and work towards the good emotions. And my kids are big feelers. And so it's really important to me that they know that it's okay to be angry or it's okay to be sad, but that we can't hurt other people in how we express those emotions. So we spend a lot of time talking about that. It's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to hit. Or it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to throw your toys. And just trying to help them put words to their emotions and how they're feeling. Trying to give them some strategies to work through some of those emotions, and also acknowledging too, like, when we're really happy and why we're happy and why we feel joy in this moment, or that sort of thing, I think is important too. So trying to give them language around that is important to me, especially I think too, because my two oldest are both boys, and it's really important to me that they are not afraid of their feelings, and that they know it's okay. It doesn't diminish them in any way to feel those feelings, but it's what we do with them that matters. So that's one thing that I put a lot of time and energy around, I would say. And I think, my kids they still have their big feelings, and they're little and they don't always respond well. And I don't always respond well to my big feelings either, but that's something we're working on as a family for sure.
I think that's such a sweetness to your children to be able to start them off with that foundation, because whatever it is that we start teaching our children young, that becomes part of their brain structure, right? Their chemistry in their brain is being wired around learning, like, this is what this feeling's named, and this is what are my options are. And of course they pick a lot of the options up, not by us telling them, but by what we model in the house. If we say, no, don't hit, but then we're like storming around being crazy when we're angry, then that's sort of a moot point. But if we're emulating what we're teaching them, we're showing them by our behavior as well. We're really giving them a foundation for life as to how do you respond to all these different ranges of emotions that we go through. And I know so many women have been raised like that, where there was only a few, like happy was okay, and nothing else. I'm not sure. But not very many other feelings are very okay sometimes in families. So it's awesome to have a family that's affirming that we have a range of emotions, and it's okay to experience all of them. And sometimes I'll tell my one son, who's highly emotional, that it's okay to be sad. It's not okay to throw a fit when you're sad, because he tends to go into these either manipulative, or sometimes when he's really tired, or just a fit comes out. So it's like, you can be sad, but when somebody tells you no, and then you start throwing a fit, that's not sad, that's a fit. And so we kind of try to discern between those two things. And it's hard for kids to get, he's 10 now, so he gets it, but it's hard for them to discern it. But I still feel like over time we need to model that wording and continue to reinforce what's acceptable way to manage this, and what's a not acceptable way. Here are some things that you can do that are great when you're feeling that way, and here's some things that are harmful to you or others that you don't want to do. And just keeping that learning going is really good. So I love you brought that up, and I love that's one of your strengths. And so how do you think God has grown you through motherhood? Because we certainly all go through the crash course, orientation by fire. I was thinking that this morning, like, what do I tell new moms? And I was just thinking, there's some things that they're going to have to learn orientation by fire, because we all jump into the pool. And before you're a mom, you might gather up books. You might not. But by the time you're like trying to grab all this information, like in the moment while you're going through it. So it's just an orientation by fire. So what has God done to grow you, Lindsey, as you've mothered your children?
Yeah, well, the big emotions thing is definitely part of it. I distinctly remember at one point, kind of early in our marriage, I think maybe our oldest was a baby, like a newborn or an infant at the time. And there was some stuff going on. And I remember my husband saying, "Doesn't it make you angry?" And I said, "I don't think anger is an emotion I really feel," which I really believed at that moment in time. And now that I have toddlers at home, it's laughable. It really is just crazy. I used to think I was a fairly patient person, but motherhood is so humbling in so many ways. And so for me, this is where God has kind of proven to me this idea that his strength is made perfect in our weaknesses. Because I'm somebody who I like to achieve, and I like to be good at things. And I think that prior to being a mom, almost anything in my life, I could just work hard enough, or read enough, or learn enough, or practice enough to get good at it. And motherhood, obviously we can be intentional about growing and getting better at different things that it involves, but it takes us to our limits all the time. And even our best efforts and good efforts are not always met with a good outcome or the response we hope to see from our kids, because we can't control how they respond to things. And so it just brings me face to face with my weaknesses all the time. And it has taught me more than anything else in my life how to rely on Jesus and how to look to God for help and for hope in the middle of really trying seasons. Nothing in my life up to that point had really taught me that, I don't think, until motherhood. And so that's a big part of it. It has humbled me. and it has just brought me to my knees and brought me to Jesus so many times. And I think it also has just taught me more about the presence of Christ with me in my days, because these really are kind of days of small things, repetitive tasks, and a lot of our days look the same. And I also went through a season of postpartum depression after our second was born. But even though that was such a hard time, I always just had a sense of just that God was with me. Like, I didn't feel abandoned. I didn't feel like Jesus wasn't there. And so I think in that way, motherhood has just really strengthened my trust in God and my relationship with him in that way, because I'm more aware of and more grateful for his presence with me, just kind of in the day in, day out, ordinary moments of life.
I really appreciate that. And I think that I can resonate. I think all moms listening to this right now can resonate with that idea that, we go into this thinking, like, I remember before I had kids and watching my friends with their kids, some of the ones who had kids first, and thinking, oh, I'll never do that, or I would never let my kids do that. And then you have kids and you're like, oh, wait, it really does teach you, like, it's not what you thought it was. And so much of it is so much more rewarding, or so much more engaging than we thought. Like, our whole self is engaged in motherhood, and yet so much of it is out of our control, and things that we thought, oh, I can manage this. I could manage a company. I had employees and managers underneath me when I became a mom. And then managing two little people, it's a totally different experience than that. I couldn't manage a 4-year-old to save my life. So it's definitely a humbling thing, and it's so good to be humble. Humility is, a bedrock in our faith. So as we become humble, the dependence, like you talked about, just comes from that place. And it's so great how God uses that to show us, you don't have this, but I do. And how much better that he has it than we do in a lot of ways. Cause we think we've got it all nailed down, but it's really, he's it. So I want to ask you about identity, because I know this is really important to you. So how has motherhood helped you sort of identify your identity? And then because we find our identity sometimes becomes mom. You hear that word like 100,000 times a day, mom, mom, mom. And so it becomes like, okay, I'm mom. But so how do we find our identity alongside within our motherhood, and how has that happened for you?
Yeah. I think that, prior to being a mom, kind of like what you were just saying, whether we are in school and we're getting grades, or we're in a job where we have a performance evaluation and like really clear, measurable goals and outcomes and all of those things, all of that kind of disappears once you're a mom. You don't get, no one is scoring you or grading you in motherhood. And there's really so few ways to see whether or not you're doing a good job, because, they're small people and they still have a lot of growth to, left to happen. And for me, I had always put so much of my worth and my value in those good grades and in my job title and, my ability to achieve and be productive and on all of those things. And so when I became a mom and I suddenly realized, oh no, this is my most important role. This is my most important job that I have right now. But I didn't have any way to see like, oh yeah, look, I'm doing a good job. Like I checked off what I needed to check off today, all of those things. It just felt so nebulous. And that was really, really hard for me. But along the way, it really is the thing that taught me that my value and my worth didn't lie in any of those other things, that it always comes from being a child of God first. And even motherhood, it changes your life in so many ways. It has changed me as a person in so many ways. Every possible dimension of my life, is different. But it has just been really comforting to me in some ways to remember that my roles have changed. My brain capacity has changed. My responsibilities have changed. My priorities have changed. But deep down, like I'm still the same daughter of God that I was before I was a mom. Like Jesus still sees the same person, in me that he has seen all along, that even though so much has shifted, it's still me. I'm still me. And I don't even know why that is so comforting to me necessarily, but it really is. And I think that it's just important to remember that at the end of the day, like no matter how this motherhood journey even turns out, like I'm still a daughter of God at the end of the day, at the end of this journey. And so are you. And so are, all my friends who are moms. Like it is such an important part of our lives, but it's not the most important characteristic of who we are, if that makes sense.
It doesn't define us. And I think that definition, finding our identity in who God says we are and what he's made us to be able to do, but it's like separating the doing from the essence of just we are beloved. Yeah. We're just the beloved of God, and to be able to rest in like your children. When you think of your children, their identity isn't in whether they got an A on their little project in school or whether they cleaned up their toys or whether they got to bed on time. Their identity is that they're your child and you love them. And so it's the same thing. It's like there's so much freedom from that performance standard that we put on ourselves. And thank God, because coming towards a juncture, I wouldn't say, I think when we have younger children, we think of coming up to age 18, well, we're about to graduate from motherhood, but not even close. I have plenty of moms. I mean, we look at our own moms. We still have moms, we have shifts, the role shifts, but we're still moms. And so coming up to this juncture, my son's 17 and a half, and looking at, if he makes good choices or challenging choices, he falls down and gets back up or doesn't get back up for a while. Those are not reflections on my worth or even how well I did as a mom. That, we do what, and it's like, like as you try to lose weight, if you've ever been on a weight loss journey or any kind of self-improvement, you can sit there and get on the scale every morning. And if the scale went down, you can go, oh, good job. I did good. And then if your scale goes up, oh, bad, and we can measure it by this external, or we can look, I went to the gym this many days, or I ate this way, and look at our behaviors and be grateful and be, and good enough. It's good enough. I did what I was supposed to do, whatever the result turned out to be. And so same thing with motherhood, we're going to pour in great things and we're going to pour in things that we regret. But in the end, we're not the one mixing the pot and making sure that everything comes out the way it's supposed to. Our child and God have to be the ones in charge of that ultimately. So it's taking ourselves out of that role of ultimate responsibility and giving ourselves a big bowl of grace, which is so important, right? And so I love that, because what you're talking about here with identity is just knowing grace and knowing that we're loved. And when we can really rest in that, it actually makes us much better moms, because we're not so wound up with anxiety, which is really the enemy of motherhood, I think. So, yeah. Okay. So I want to ask you, I've got a note I'm reading for a second, about accepting imperfections in yourself. And we've kind of touched on that, but I know that's like such a heart of yours, especially at the drafting desk where you and Rebecca talk about this all the time. So talk about that to moms, about just how it's been for you and what you would like to say to them about accepting imperfection.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it goes back to what we've been talking about, right? This idea that we're children of God. And I think for me, I don't know about you, but my experience was that I grew up in the church as a Christian, but my entire idea about my relationship with God began with the idea that I have sinned and messed up, instead of starting with the idea that first I'm a child of God, and God loves me and wants to be in relationship with me. And I kind of got things backwards. And I think there's a temptation to do that in motherhood as well, like we've been talking about, to get to the end of the day and to focus only on our poor response to the temper tantrum, or to focus only on the developmental milestones our kid hasn't met yet, or to focus on just, for me, sometimes I struggle being a stay-at-home mom. I feel distracted, or I don't find a lot of joy sometimes in just the mundane tasks that it involves. My mind is sometimes off in another place, and I can beat myself up about that. All of these things, right, in and out of motherhood. And for me, for many, many years, I would get to the end of every day and just see nothing but failure and feel nothing but failure, because I hadn't lived up to some impossible standard that I had in my own head. And I think that we so often talk about perfectionism like it's a personality trait, like people will say things like, oh, well, I'm not a perfectionist. You should see what my kitchen looks like right now. And I don't think perfectionism is about like how tidy we are or whether or not we always made straight A's. I think it is about this kind of pervasive belief and sense that somehow we're not enough, that we're not living up to the standard that God has for us or that we have for ourselves. And for me, I have felt that in every area of my life across the board. And over time, I have just learned to accept the grace that Jesus offered, to actually believe that I am his kid and that he loves me and that he is present with me in my life as it is right now. Every misstep, every imperfection, every, thing that I wish I could be doing better. Like, I don't think that that's what Jesus sees when he looks at my life. He wants communion and relationship with us more than he wants our performance. And like I was saying before, motherhood, we don't get a grade no matter how perfect we are at it. Like, we're not getting gold stars for it at the end of the day. And I just had to learn to take a deep breath and to just embrace the imperfection, to embrace my full humanity, and just learn to trust that Jesus is with me and that he can bring me joy and peace and all of that right in the middle of the mess and the imperfection. And I'm still, at the end of the day, always I think my default is to focus on the failure or the missteps or just a failure is such a strong word. But even just the, just the imperfections, whatever it is. But instead, like, I just want to look at my days and I just want to see how Jesus was with us, right in the middle of it. And I can only do that when I am willing to embrace some of the imperfection. So that's that's kind of what I would say about that, I think.
I think it comes down, it reminds me of a lot of the thinking I've done about how we have an inner Pharisee. And I think that Pharisee, is always setting up more and more rules for us to follow. And they're little minuscule things of everything that has to go a certain way in order to earn, right? We need to earn the love that way. That's what the Pharisee lives by, is to earn what's already been freely given. But then we can shift gears into this, like you're talking about, this relational experience where it's already been given. We can rest in it. We have it already. It's not to be earned. And so then any of the works that we do are responsive rather than creating some sort of, thing that God already gave us. And so lately I've been really thinking a lot about love as the foundation. It's so simple. We should know this, or I don't know, that's a strong word, but just the sense of like, when you say something that sounds so simple, but it's so profound when you actually start to live in it. And I feel like in my home, God has really grown me into loving, teaching me how to love, and that this is what it looks like to love despite behavior, to love through difficult seasons, to love without expectation of an outcome, and so it's a growing process. But I feel like the more we are steeped in his love, the more we can extend that love to our children. And there's really not a measure for that, is there? It's just that we're present and we're loving them and we're with them. And so it changes the whole dynamic of how we even look at, because the measuring stick is sort of taken out of it. It's not a measuring stick thing anymore. It's really,
you can't measure it. Yeah.
Right. And so we spend these, and that's why I think when the scripture says that God measures differently than man measures, I feel like that's part of what that means. I'm sure it means so much more than I understand, but I've been thinking of that lately. We're so into measuring things, but God isn't measuring those things the way we're measuring them. And so we need to break those measuring sticks and just abide in love, let the love pour, because when we abide in love, it pours out. It's not something we have to drum up and make happen. We are more loving because we've been abiding in that love. So I love what you're talking about here with that too, Lindsey, and so grateful that you both have that mission to share that and continue to speak it, because we need to hear it over and over so we can just get it past the epidermis, but anyway. So I would love to ask you what you would say to a new mom. And I know you're closer to being a new mom than I am, but I sure have things that are on my heart to say to new moms, because it's such a transition stage. So what would be your word to a new mom?
Yeah. I think that I would kind of echo what we were talking about earlier. I would want her to know that her identity was secure before she became a mom, and it's still secure right in the middle of motherhood. So much is changing, roles, responsibilities, your body, your brain, your emotions, all of those things feel up in the air. But like who you are at your core is not up for debate. That's just, that is something that's given to us by God, by nature of the fact that we're his children and he's created us. And I think that, so motherhood changes us on so many levels, but it doesn't ultimately change who we are,
I love that.
And I think the other thing I would say is that there is in motherhood, in much of life, but certainly in motherhood, there is a huge space between struggle and failure. I think that I have been so afraid of failing as a mom, and goodness knows I make all sorts of mistakes and there are so many things that I don't do well, but I don't know anymore that it is possible to fail as a mom. It is really, really hard. And it will take us to our limits. And I don't think any of us could ever do the job perfectly. And we will struggle and it will be hard, but like, that's okay. That's just sort of the nature of the gig. I just heard something and this just came to mind, but I can't even remember now what I was listening to, but somewhere on a podcast, I heard someone use this example that I think is really perfect for motherhood, which is that if somebody wants to run a marathon and they are training for a marathon, you hit a point, your body hits, I'm not a runner, so take this with a grain of salt, but your body hits a point where it is exhausted, right? And it has to just push through the exhaustion. But nobody ever training for a marathon is going to look at a personal trainer and say, like, can you teach me how to do this without being tired? That's impossible.
Right.
And instead, you have to learn I think the expression they used on this podcast was you have to learn where to put the tired. And I think that applies to motherhood just really, really well. Like there's just no perfect recipe of self-care and making good choices that's going to make it not exhausting.
Right.
It's more about like, what do we do with the exhaustion? Where do we put it? Who do we trust to carry it for us? Which for me is Jesus, right? But just trusting that that's part of the process and that there's joy in the middle of it and there's joy at the end of it as well. So yeah, that's a long rambling answer, but
I think that's so good because I think the vision of a marathon, it is a marathon, and I did used to run long distances.
Oh, okay. So
I only ran up half marathons, that was my longest run, but I ran 6 miles a day. So I know about the wall and I know about pushing through on different times. And sometimes we had the stamina to go those 6 miles without feeling like it's 6 miles. And other days, every mile felt like it was going to kill you. So it's just, that is exactly like motherhood. Cause I know there are days where we're like, I got this. This is awesome. And and then there's other days where every mile is going to kill us. And so knowing that it's a marathon and knowing that it helps us not to personalize that we're not doing it right. And that what we see outside of ourselves in images that people put up, not meaning to harm anybody, meaning just to share. Because I know when I put up something that my son and I are doing together, I'm not trying to go, wow, I'm a great mom. Look at me.
Right.
I'm just sharing something that happened. But I never really put up me pulling my hair out or yeah. or him at his worst or whatever. And so you don't get to see a full scope of what's going on in a person's life. And then you think, oh, they've got this and that. And they do, that's a piece of what they have, but you don't see a lot of the other stuff that's going on. And so when we see those other things in our own lives, we can end up feeling really less than. And so I think it's so great to know that everyone's struggling. And the more you get to know people intimately, the more you know how they really are struggling. Everybody's really struggling at different levels in different ways, and that nobody has this all together, and we're not supposed to. It's okay not to have it all together, and to be doing your best. And I love that you said you can't fail as a mom. I feel like certain moms, like if you don't try, like the kind of mom that you go, wow, she left her kids alone in a hotel and went out to a bar. That was
right.
That
That's
was a
like
mom
a whole
fail.
different level.
I will call that a mom fail.
Yeah.
I will, but but most
Yeah.
of us are not doing that.
Yeah.
Most of us are showing up cooking meals, or you know what, grabbing meals from Burger King and serving them, or whatever. We're doing what we've got to do, but we're doing it because we love the people that are with us. We've got our own capacity, and we're going to the edge of that capacity to serve these little people and help them grow up. And that's not a fail. So however shape that takes, whether it's serving Burger King or giving your gourmet, organic, whatever, it's okay.
I could definitely eat McDonald's for this.
Right? We just started back to eating McDonald's a few weeks ago. Like what? I went to McDonald's. Not a mom fail.
Nope.
So it's okay. Like give yourselves a bucket of grace. I totally love that. That's awesome. And then what would you say? Because there are moms who are really suffering in their motherhood. They're either dealing with chronic illness or a child gone wayward or just really difficult season with one of their kids, maybe tantrums or bullying going on or whatever. What would you say to moms who are struggling right now, Lindsey?
Yeah. Well, I would say that I have been there. Like I was saying, I had postpartum depression and anxiety after our second son was born, but it took me over a year of struggling through it to even realize what was happening. And by that time I was pregnant with our next child. So, that, was just a hard season. And I didn't know, like, I just really thought, I just need to suck it up. Like, what's wrong with me that I am having such a hard time? And so I would just encourage moms to just be honest, just to say the words out loud, how hard it really is to find a safe person, whether it's your spouse or a friend or your doctor or whoever, to just find a way to say out loud, whether you have, postpartum depression or something serious like that or not. It could just be a bad day or a hard season with a hard kid, to just say out loud how really hard it is. I have one of my children is extremely strong-willed and just there's a lot of challenging behaviors. And one of my very dear friends also has a strong-willed child, and we kind of wrestle through some of those same behaviors with our kids. And I think if I did not have her to occasionally say, like, what is wrong with my child? Or how am I ever going to survive parenting this kid? It would feel so isolating. And it still does some days, but to try to just find the safe people that you can be honest with about how really, really hard it is. Because it is really, really hard sometimes. And again, I would just want her to know that, like, Jesus has it, that she is safe and her kid is ultimately loved by God. And I guess sometimes it sounds cheesy. I don't know. Like you talked about the love piece before. I don't know a way to say it that doesn't sound cheesy, but I would just encourage her to just rest in the truth of knowing that it's not all up to her.
Yeah, I love that too, Lindsey, because I think just even for me as a mom, hearing those words from you today, Jesus got this. I could have a poster that I would need to go like have a timer on my phone to remind me, go look at that poster. Remember, Jesus got this, because we forget that he does. And it's no small thing. Like he created everything. He created each one of us. And so him having it is exactly what we want, and so we forget that and we get a little like the anxiety builds up. Oh no, what if this, and strong-willed children, I have one, and
Oh yeah.
So, but I mean, the most glorious, amazing people, the strong-willed child has a brain and ideas and a way they want things to go and vision. And I mean, and they'll stand for things, maybe sometimes the wrong things, but they'll stand for them, and it's like, there's so much good within that child, but it can take us down to our knees very quickly as moms. So I've been so grateful for some of the resources and the people. Like you say, I can even text. I have 2 friends that I'll text just this hard day, or whatever. It doesn't have to be big. I'll tell you about it later. They pray. They'll send me back encouragement. Hang in there. They know, like, Hard day means hard day. We're having one. And it's so good to share it, because even if you can't call a friend or talk to somebody in person, having somebody that you can connect with. And I think I know your friend, and she's not near you. She's not in the same town. And so being able to just connect by text or phone or online, so important, because we can hold one another up that way and link arms even from a distance is so good. Such a good word. Well, I want to thank you so very much for joining in with me in these conversations, and I want you to tell everybody again where they can find you so they can find all the things you're doing. And am I right that you've been working on a book as well?
I am. I'm working on a book. I said I was gonna try to start pitching it to agents at the end of March, and I didn't hit that deadline, but I'm working on it. I'm plugging away at it. And it's about perfectionism and kind of some of the incorrect things that I think I believed about God and myself that created a really good environment for perfectionism to grow, and then sort of how I unlearned some of those things over time. So,
and I love the way you use words, Lindsey.
Oh,
so I think people will be very blessed when that comes out, because you have a very a good way with words. I don't know how to say that better, but I remember when I would put pieces into Kindred Mom, and your input was so helpful, and you just have some certain turns of phrases that stick. You have stick-to-itiveness in some of the ways that you use your words. They stick with us, so I love that, and I can't wait to read what you write. So
thank you, Patty.
So where can people find you?
Yeah, well, you can always find me at kindredmom.com. I publish an essay there about once a month, and I'm on the editorial team, and I am often over on their Instagram account. So you can find me there pretty much every day. And then thedraftingdesk.com is the email newsletter that I run with my friend Rebecca. We say it is soulful encouragement for recovering perfectionists. So that's just a once a month email that we send out. Usually one of us shares a personal reflection about perfectionism and how it's showing up in our life. So that's thedraftingdesk.com. And then I'm at lindseycornett.com as well, which has my personal writing, and you can find links to all my social media and stuff there as well.
That's so good. And I love, and Kindred Mom has a podcast as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sweetness. I always find myself talking back to when that's awesome. That's a good I feel like I'm in the room talking. And what I love about it, I just want to promote that just for a second, because I feel like when I'm listening to Kindred Mom, there's never a way that it has to be done. I think that's one of the deepest truths about what Kindred Mom is about, is that there are certain things that no Kindred Mom would do. Like those things are probably off the radar as far as what would be in the scope of loving motherhood. But in terms of within loving motherhood, there's a range of, well, we don't do any screens. Well, we do screens. Well, we do screens 5 hours, whatever. It's just there's an openness to why. Well, why does that work for you? Well, we're trying it out. And I just love the growing aspect, the transparency, and the fact that it's not just rigid into one way that everything has to shape out. So it's a great way to be exposed to many moms and the way that many moms are doing motherhood and moving along together. It's a beautiful place. So I hope women do check you all out in both writing and the podcast. Anyway, well, thank you for being with us, Lindsey. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Patty. It was really fun chatting with you.